We begin in Iran, where the country's president is warning the leader of the United States. Any changes to the 2015 nuclear agreement, and Donald Trump will regret it.
If America leaves the nuclear accord, this will entail historic remorse for it.
Hassan Rouhani did not provide any specifics of what that could entail. His comments come less than a week before Donald Trump will decide whether to renew his country's commitment to the Iran nuclear deal. The 2015 agreement with 6 world powers calls for Iran to limit its nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions. Trump has called it the worst deal ever. He says it fails to address the country's ballistic missile program and contains sunset clauses that lift certain provisions on its enrichment program. France and other countries are trying to persuade Washington to remain in the accord. The British Foreign Secretary will discuss the issue with White House officials during a 2-day visit to the U.S. As the world awaits Trump's decision, hardliners inside Iran are calling on the country to resume its nuclear development. Amid the rising tension, fewer companies are taking part in this year's annual oil and gas trade show in Iran. The Iran Oil Show began on Sunday in the capital, Tehran. About 1,600 foreign companies are taking part in what is the largest oil expo in the Middle East. But the number of firms is down about 25% from last year.
The threat that if we continue to make business with Iran, that our branch in the U.S. will also undergo some limitations, sanctions, maybe even will have to stop business there, because this is more important for us than Iran.
European and Japanese companies are watching to see whether the Trump administration will scrap the 2015 nuclear accord.
Well, another nuclear issue, this one with a deadline just days away. Of course, I'm talking about Iran. Britain's Foreign Secretary is urging President Trump not to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. In a New York Times opinion piece, Boris Johnson writes this: "At this delicate juncture, it would be a mistake to walk away from the nuclear agreement and remove the restraints that it places on Iran. I am sure of one thing: every available alternative is worse. The wisest course would be to improve the handcuffs rather than break them." Well, Iran's president, for his part, warned the U.S. would come to regret it if it chooses to quit the deal. Take a listen.
If America leaves the nuclear accord, it will soon see that this will entail historic remorse.
Mr. Trump is set to decide by Saturday whether or not to waive sanctions against Iran again. If he does not, he will be effectively pulling the United States out of that nuclear agreement. So here's a recap of what's in that deal. The US, Iran, China, Russia, France, Britain and the European Union signed on to the 2015 agreement. Iran is required to reduce centrifuges, cut its nuclear weapon and weapons-grade uranium stockpiles, and allow inspections. Now, in exchange, the US and UN waived sanctions, and Tehran had $100 billion of its frozen funds returned. President Trump called it the worst deal in history. He said the U.S. would withdraw unless major flaws were corrected. He wants international inspectors to have immediate access to nuclear facilities. Right now, Iran has 24 days to allow inspectors in. Mr. Trump also wants Iran punished for continuing to develop long-range missiles. There's also the issue that some provisions of the deal sunset in 2025.
In just a few years, as key restrictions disappear, Iran can sprint towards a rapid nuclear weapons breakout. We got weak inspections in exchange for no more than a purely short-term and temporary delay in Iran's path to nuclear weapons.
In 7 years, Iran will be able to enrich its uranium. The president thinks limits on Iran's enrichment program should be permanent. The deal also does not address Iran's alleged funding of terrorism. But supporters of the agreement say it was designed to deal with just one problem, Iran's nuclear program.